Welcome to part 2. Now comes the fun part. We're going to take the dialogue system we made in part 1 and actually connect it to a 3D game. So let's get started. We'll start by creating character body 3D. Now give it collision shape. For shape I will just use box. I already prepared a simple segment character. If you want to use it, I'll leave it in the description. Let's size it so the collision shape roughly matches the character. Next, let's add an area 3D. I'll call it interaction area. This is the area that our interaction system will detect. Choose a collision shape. Make it slightly bigger than NPC's physical collision. That way, player can interact with the NPC long before getting physical with him. So, the outer collision is only for interaction, the inner collision is what actually blocks the player. And as you can see, I also added a simple idle animation. Let's create a script for the character body. I'm gonna call mine animated object. This script will only be responsible for playing animations. If your NPC has more behavior, you can instead use your main NPC script for some gameplay logic. I will just make it an animation script because this is just an example. I'm gonna delete everything I don't need from the generated script. I'm only gonna keep the apply gravity and move and slide. Then I will just quickly add the animation code. And set the animation player path. Let's change our NPC's name. Save it. Now drag the NPC into the main scene. There he is. Next, let's actually make him interactive. One important thing, make sure that your interaction area is on the layer that you have your interactions on. Mine is layer 2. We'll be using interaction system I showed you in a previous tutorial. If you already have your own interaction system, feel free to use that instead. If you don't, I will just leave the tutorial link in the description. Let's create a script for the interaction area. I'll call mine NPC Interactable. I will save it inside the NPC scripts folder. This script extends my interactable class from the interaction tutorial. Instead of writing functions from scratch, I will just copy over these two, interact and get interact prompt. I will also add exported variable called object name. This lets us customize what the NPC prompt says for each NPC. I'll just set it to NPC's name. Now, inside Interact, instead of passing, we will start our dialogic timeline. For me, that's the intro timeline that we created in part 1. Our interaction prompt will be press E to interact with, followed by NPC's name. So, let's try it. As you can see, nothing happens. That's because I forgot one important thing. Since we're using Aria 3D for interaction, our interaction raycast has to detect areas. Go into your player controller, find your interaction ray, under collide with, make sure that areas is checked. Now let's try again. That works. Now interacting with NPC starts the dialogue we made in part 1. However, there are already a few issues. The player can jump around while entering their name, and also the camera completely freezes during the dialogue. This is not what we want, so let's fix that. Going to our base dialogue style. For 3D game, we don't need full background or portraits, so disable them both. If you're making something with visual novel or mixing 2D sections with 3D, then you can instead disable this only in the integrated styles and just use them accordingly. Now the camera works again, but there's another issue. Whenever we click inside the dialogue, the mouse gets captured, which means we can't actually click the dialogue choices. To solve that, we're going to write a proper dialogue manager. But first, we'll update our existing UI manager that we started in interaction tutorial. The script's role is managing all of our UIs. So, dialogue naturally fits here as well. First, let's create an enum called UI mode. It will have two different dialogue modes, ambient and locked. Ambient means that the player can still move and look around, as well as interact with the world. Locked dialogue is kinda like a cutscene. The player loses movement, camera rotation, and can't interact with things. I'm also gonna move these two functions from player controller to the UI manager, capture mouse and release mouse. I think they will fit better here. While at it, I'm gonna add a comment that this section will have mouse functions. The one above that will be interact prompt functions. You don't have to do that, but it will be more convenient to navigate when the script gets longer. And for the UI manager, it can get quite long when you get more UI to manage. Because UI manager is auto-load, in the controller, when we use the capture and release mouse functions, we'll just call it from the UI manager. I will also move over the mouse captured variable. Let's test everything quickly. Nothing broke? Great. Now let's create an array called active mode. This stores every currently active UI mode. Next we'll write a few helper functions. Push mode. This adds mode into the active modes list. And also update UI. So let's write a function for updating that UI. If dialog is locked, hide interact prompt and release the mouse. If it isn't, capture the mouse. Now let's go back up and write the rest of the functions we need. Pop mode will remove a mode and also update UI. Has mode checks if a mode is currently active and returns true or false value. Is dialog active? Returns true if either of the dialog modes is active. Is dialog locked? Returns true only if dialog is active. Inside show interact prompt, I will also add a check so that interact prompt disappears during the lock dialog. Then I also add a small reset function. It's useful for save, load, or restarting the game. Now let's make a new script. I will call it Dialogic Manager. Unlike UI Manager, this script will only manage Dialogic itself. Its job is to connect Dialogic with our game. First, inside ready, we will connect the Dialogic signals. Timeline started, timeline ended, and question shown. Before writing the rest, let's quickly create one Dialogic variable inside variables. Create a folder called global, and inside it, create a variable called dialog mode. We will use this variable to tell Dialogic whether this conversation should be ambient or locked. Now, for what the functions here do. On timeline started, runs automatically every time dialog begins. It reads our dialog mode variables and decides whether this should be ambient or locked. Also important, I accidentally wrote Dialogic mode instead of dialog mode, so change that or you will get an error later. Out question shown. Whenever a dialog choice appears, we temporarily release the mouse, just to be sure, but you still should have choices only in locked mode. Ambient mode should be more of a background dialog and the locked dialog should be something that the player has to be actively focused on. Also, make sure that this function has floor info dictionary inside the brackets. If you leave it out, this will also give you an error. On timeline ended, runs after a dialog finishes. It simply removes whichever dialog mode was active and restores the normal game state. And finally, we have start dialog. This will be our custom way of starting dialog. Instead of calling Dialogic directly, every NPC or object will call this function instead. It first checks whether dialog is already running. If it is, it simply returns, so dialogs can get on top of each other. If one isn't running, it stores which dialog mode we want, and then starts the requested timeline. Also here, just change Dialogic mode to dialog mode. This is the second place I got this wrong. Now let's save everything. Back in variables, I will set the default dialog mode to ambient. This is completely optional, you could just leave it empty or set it to locked instead, and that depends on what you'll be using the most. Now let's return to our NPC interactable. I forgot to make Dialogic Manager autoload, so go into Project Settings, Global, Autoloads, and add Dialogic Manager here. Now you can use it anywhere in the project. And now, in NPC Interactable, instead of calling Dialogic Start directly, we'll instead use our new Dialogic Manager Start Dialog function. We will start the intro timeline using locked mode. Let's check it. If you fix the few errors I mentioned, you can skip to the time on screen. Locked mode should be mostly working for you. I'll just go again over fixing those few errors. So yeah, I wrote Dialogic mode instead of dialogue mode, so I'm just gonna copy the correct name. And now it works, almost. The mouse isn't released when choices appear. It's because on question shown, I forgot to add info dictionary in the brackets. After that, the problem disappears. Now choices work correctly. But before we finish up locked mode, let's also test ambient mode. Switch the NPC Interactable to ambient mode. This works, except jumping with dialogue causes the camera to get stuck in place. The reason is that Dialogic uses space by default to advance dialogue, which is also our jump button, at least for me. So, go into the input map, create a new action. You can call it whatever you want. This action will be used for advancing dialogue. Originally Dialogic uses space, which conflicts with jumping, so now that I think about it, you could probably just remove space from default Dialogic action. I will bind enter and also left mouse button. Now go into the Dialogic settings, text, input action, and select your new action. If you only remove space from default action, you don't need to change anything here. Let's test it. Perfect. Ambient dialogue now lets us jump around freely without locking the camera. The final step is actually locking the player movement. So switch back to locked dialogue. Even though we're using locked mode, the player can still move around inside the player controller. Go into physics process right after gravity, but before any movement input. Add if UI manager is dialog locked, return. This completely disables any player movement during locked dialogue. And if you also want to disable rotating camera, go into unhandled input, and at the very top, add exactly the same check. Now let's test it. Great. During log dialogue, player can't move, can't rotate camera, and the conversation is completely locked. Here, you could probably even have it changed to cinematic camera or casting camera or something like that. One last feature I want to show you are signals. They are incredibly useful. So let's create a signal in our timeline. Back in the Dialogic Manager, I'll create a simple handler. If the signal argument is print, I will just print a message. This example won't really do anything useful, it's just to demonstrate how signals work. Oh, and I forgot to connect the signal. So let's do that. Now it works. Whenever Dialogic sends signal, our code reacts. Just to show you what it can do, in my own game, I use this for something like opening books. When you interact with the book, the dialogue plays normally, and at the end of it, it sends signal that automatically opens the book depending on the book ID. And for the end, I'm also going to mention that Dialogic has its own built-in save support, quite a few ways to save. There's a slot-based save system that will be useful for visual novels and stuff. If that fits your project, feel free to use it. Personally, I use get full state and load full state instead. I found them much easier to integrate in my own save system. So if you are already making your own save manager, I would definitely recommend taking a look at these functions and picking what works best for you. And that's everything. If this tutorial helped you, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching.